Over the past few months, the release of the Epstein files have made headlines time and time again, but who is Jeffrey Epstein and what did the release of the files actually mean? Jeffrey Epstein, born in 1953, is a well-known financier who was convicted of soliciting minor prostitution. Prior to creating his sex trafficking network, Epstein worked as a private school teacher teaching math and physics before joining Wall Street in 1976 and working for Bear Stearns. In 1982, Epstein opened his own consulting company, though the exact nature of the company is unknown. He claimed it was financial management of wealthy clients. In 2000, Epstein started a foundation which funded molecular biology at Harvard University. In 2005, a criminal case was opened in Florida by police after a 14-year-old girl's parents claimed Epstein paid for her massage. More allegations were collected of Epstein sexually abusing underage girls at his mansion. It was later said by federal prosecutors that the abuse dates back as early as 2002. In May 2007, the FBI joined the case to identify more victims that outlined 60 criminal counts against Epstein. Court documents show that Epstein was aware at the time that his victims were underage and that he paid them hundreds of dollars in cash for each encounter. The U.S. Attorney Office offered to end the investigation with the condition that Epstein pleads guilty to state charges, accept a prison term, and register as a sex offender. In 2008, Epstein pleaded guilty to charges of solicitation and prostitution, including minors, and was sentenced to 18 months, of which he served less than 13. In 2015, an accuser of Epstein sued one of his longtime confidants and associates for defamation. Jane Maxwell is a former British solicitor who helped facilitate Epstein's operations in abuse of underage girls. Maxwell is currently serving a 20-year prison sentence after being charged in 2021 with 5 counts of aiding Epstein's abuse of underage girls. In late 2018, Epstein's allegations resurfaced, resulting in his arrest on July 6, 2019, where he was charged with sex trafficking and conspiracy in the following days. Epstein was denied bail and he was held in the Metropolitan Correction Center in Manhattan to await his trial. On August 10, 2019, Epstein was found dead in his cell while awaiting his trial. His death was later ruled as suicide. Although the legal case against Epstein was dismissed multiple years ago, the files regarding the case remain significant. The Epstein files are a collection of documents that contain evidence of Epstein's sex trafficking operations in addition to his social networks and business transactions. A significant portion of the allegation in the files are linked to Epstein's private island located in the Virgin Islands known as the Epstein Island. Airstrip employees recount seeing Epstein board and arrive with girls who appear to be under the age of consent. Epstein Island hosted circles of yachts, lunches, and dinner parties with attendance from many wealthy and prominent figures. In years following the case's dismissal, some of the files regarding the case have been publicly released over the years, but until recently, many have been confidential. After years of public pressure, President Donald J. Trump signed the Epstein Transparency Act on November 19, 2025. The act states that all documents, records, and such related to the investigation of Epstein and Maxwell, with a few exceptions, must be publicly released within 30 days. The act also states that the identities of suspected victims and documents, including photos and videos, must be redacted. The act states that the names of public figures, high-profile individuals, and immunity deals may not be redacted to protect reputation. 500 lawyers were tasked with the redaction of the files. Despite the Transparency Act's regulations on redactions, since the release, there has been multiple accounts over and under redactions. In one email in the file, the sender name was redacted despite them not being a suspected victim. Epstein survivor Charlene Rochard states publishing images of victims while shielding is just a failure of complete justice, after the Department of Justice failed to redact the identities of suspected victims in certain photographs and videos. The Department of Justice failed to meet the timeline set in the Transparency Act, though over 3 million pages, 2,000 videos, and 180,000 photos were released on January 30th, 2026. Prior to this release, only 500,000 files had been released. A spokesperson from the Department of Justice stated that only 0.1% of the files were unredacted, though this adds up to over 3,000 pages. Many public figures were mentioned in the files. However, it is important to note that this does not necessarily indicate any wrongdoing. High-profile public figures were mentioned in the files include Elon Musk, Bill Gates, President Donald J. Trump, former Prince Andrew and his ex-wife Sarah Ferguson, the Clintons, Steve Trish, and Slovakia's foreign minister. Though the response to the release of the files is less intense than much of the public expected, there has been some significant events since the release. Musk's estranged daughter Vivian Wilson verified the authenticity of an email correspondence between Epstein and Musk. In response to the release of the files, Prince Andrew and Sarah Ferguson have lost their titles of Duke and Duchess of York. Co-owner of New York Giants Steve Trish is undergoing an investigation from the NFL, though he has stated that he does not take up any invitations and never visited Epstein Island. Slovakia's former foreign minister has resigned despite no accusations of wrongdoing. Both Clintons are identified in the files. Though they have previously denied visiting the island, they have now agreed to testify. President Donald J. Trump is one of the most prominent figures mentioned in the files. Reference to Trump is mentioned more times in the files than Jesus is mentioned in the Bible. Harry Potter's name is mentioned throughout the series, language is spoken, and more stars visible to the naked eye. The Epstein files shed light on the extent of Epstein's operations as well as the power held by those mentioned in the files and lack of autonomy the victims continue to hold regarding the case.